And I would find that it would try to like autocomplete the sentence. And I'd be like, fuck you, quit it. I'm trying to think, And that's been true the whole time. And it's also been true within comments in code. Because like the reason you write a comment in code is because you're trying to articulate what you're about to do.
Yeah. I hate this so much.
Right. You start writing a comment and it's like, I think I know what you mean.
And I'm like, quit it. Let me finish thinking.
Butterscotch. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 520 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, the miscellaneous programmer.
I'm Sam, and I'm the artiste.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today's May 9th, 2020 vibes. Before we get started, we have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show. We'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you so much for your recurring donations to help keep the podcast going. So we got a lot of studio news today. First and foremost, episode 520, Blaze It. That's 10 years.
10 years.
52 weeks a year by 10 years.
That is crazy. That's actually crazy.
We have had like the occasional bonus episode.
And we
also,
missed a few.
We missed a couple of
days,
weeks.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's basically 10 years.
It's probably pretty close to exactly 10 years.
10 years of weekly podcast is just weird. I think what's unfortunate in a weird way is that like, because it would take so long to listen to all of it, that's 520 hours. You know what I mean? That's so long.
Yeah.
Even at 2x or whatever, you're still looking at.
So what is that? That's 20 something days? No, right? Yeah.
It's just crazy. I don't know how you even, because I don't listen to any of them, ever. We just
I used to
send it.
I used to listen to them on a lag just so I could like see what we were talking about because I'd already forgotten. I mean, I forget the moment we're done podcasting.
Just for your own memory purposes.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to have be trailing like a month and be like, what were we up to last month? And after a while, I kind of stopped doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you listened to the podcast for 8 hours a day, by the time you got to this episode, there will be 9 new episodes.
No, then you can catch up just in one more day.
Then you catch up another day and a half. You'll be good to go.
Man, that's wild. It's just so many.
Man, we just cannot shut the hell up.
Jeez,
I guess is what
everybody just shut the fuck up. Is that?
Yeah, I'm doing so many of these biz dev meetings right now, and every time we get started, I just always kind of have to give a warning at some point. I'm like, look, I can bloviate all day, so. If I start getting off track, let's just get me back on track. Because a lot of people are also happy to bloviate. It turns out if you just start talking,
you start going,
yeah, man, we can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I think it's as like Midwestern Americans, we also don't like silence. So if there's a gap in a conversation, we're getting in there.
Time to talk about the weather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyways, that's pretty cool. All right, let's talk about what's going on in the studio. We got lots of news items. So we'll get a couple of kind of quicker news items out of the way. So one is, I mentioned that Adam and I had our interview with the Game Maker's Notebook with Trent Custers. And that interview will be out on, I think, Monday. So the Monday before this podcast comes out. So
that's my understanding.
We'll have some links in the show notes for that. It's a pretty good conversation. It's on video. It's one of the few times we've done video podcast. Which is pretty cool. I don't know.
Yeah, I find the video format to be perfectly fine at the very beginning, but then as I'm trying to manage my facial expressions and stuff as it goes on, I start getting more and more somber faced because that's my natural face state, and it's harder and harder.
Yeah, then you're like, what do I do with my hand?
Yeah, exactly.
If somebody else is talking for a while and you're just sitting there, you got to be more animated.
Looking like a ding dong, just staring off into space. It's different.
Yeah. Give him the old Joe Biden debate move, just kind of go slack jawed and just kind of look off into the middle distance. So anyways, it's pretty good. It was a pretty good conversation. It was wide ranging. It covered stuff all the way back from our childhood and up to forming the studio and a lot of kind of historical retrospectives and stuff. We also got funded on the plushies.
Yeah, and it got extended by a week. So actually, if you're listening to this episode, there's still 2 more days to go get one if you want one. Check the show notes for it. But yeah, there's we have 225 sold, which is amazing. So if you want to get one, you're gonna get one. You know what I mean? It's no longer
it's a Flux plushie hanging out with a juice box and with a wrench. The building wrench from the game
with wrenchy.
And this is the only time that this particular thing will exist. So got that extra week, and we confirmed because the people who over at Makeship were like, hey, do you guys want to push it out another week? And we're like, does that delay production? And they said nope. And so we're like, why wouldn't we do that? So it's extra week, nothing gets delayed, and it's guaranteed you're going to get it now. I think that's how amazing. That works. Guaranteed. Yep. So yeah. One of a kind, time limited offer. Go get it and stick that plushie behind it.
It's called a collector's edition.
Yeah. Collector's edition. Yeah, that's right.
In the sense that you can, I guess,
have it,
add it to your collection.
Yep. When it comes to Butterscotch merch too, it's like it's very rare.
It's all ephemeral. You got to be all ephemeral at any time. Yeah.
There's a handful of people out there who've like been to the 2 shenanigans we had.
It's got badges and like cards and shit that we made for those.
All kinds of like just one-off random stuff. So if you have been trying to stay on top of basically 10 years of miscellaneous merch opportunities that we've put out, all of them very limited, you could end up with a pretty cool collection at this point. But each thing just once.
Yep. So buckle up, get in there, get it fast. Otherwise, patch 1.1 for Crashlands 2 is out.
Yeah.
By the time this episode comes, we're recording this on Friday. We're hoping to just get the patch out today on Friday, so that way our players can play it over the weekend. Like some of our marketing folks were like, well, like Monday would be better because of press, and we're like, no.
Yeah. Just get it out.
We want our players to play it. So
that's always my question.
Yeah, that's always the other question is we give press everything they could possibly need to actually cover us, and they're like, well, we got other stuff to do. So
they're like, we're busy though. We got to replay Oblivion.
What's the point?
So we make the game for the players, not for the press. So that's how we are going to orient our patch deployment strategy
as soon as it's ready.
Yeah. So let's talk about patch 1.1.
What's the deal?
So this patch covers several of the major points that players have kind of been wanting, largely with relation to how the game compares to the original in terms of certain features or whatever.
Yes.
So the 3 kind of big things that came up consistently across the player base is the compendium,
which we've talked about before. Yeah.
Yep, we talked about that. How pets work, which we reworked those last week, where basically pets in Crashlands 2 would just have this longer cooldown big attack. But because of in the first game, pets would just attack constantly in combat, then there's just a general vibe in the players that like, my pet just doesn't really do much, and especially in the chaos of combat, like you may not notice that your pet went in there and blasted some shit, right? And so you do notice when it's just standing there doing nothing.
That's usually what a kid does is for like, it's just an awareness thing. It's like it's hard to see. Exactly
even if you do notice it doing stuff, if it's doing stuff every 20 seconds, I think that also counts as barely doing anything from a...
Yeah, even if it's a big thing that it does. It's like, I'd rather it do that, more.
Because people think of things in terms of frequency, and especially because it's hard to tell impact in the context of, in most games, but in Crashlands 2. Combat is super chaotic. There's stuff happening all over the place. And so getting a sense of like, the pet jumped in and like fucking wrecked stuff.
It's hard to see.
You don't actually... Like I couldn't tell that was happening, and I knew it was happening, but I couldn't feel it happening.
Well, because it's like that video where people are passing a basketball around and then the gorilla
just walks
through back.
You just don't notice it. It's like there's definitely a 6-foot tall gorilla moving through this frame, but everyone's like,
those are my favorite fucking things where you only get to experience the one time, but like some video or there's like optical illusions where somebody shows something. And then they're like, and they loop it back around, and you're like, I swear this is just you're fucking with me, and this is actually just the video is just longer, and you changed it, right? And then you look at the video, no, sure enough, it is because like there's a guy back when I used to spend a lot of time on TikTok. There was a guy who would just like do these like short video based illusions where the whole shtick was. You watch it the first time, he reveals what happened, and then you just watch it again, and then now you can see it. And each time my mind was just fucking blown. I was just like, how?
And the funny thing is, if you're familiar with this guy, then you would see his video come up and you're like, I know he's gonna pull
and you still
shit.
Don't know.
And you still won't see it.
It's basically sleight of hand. So we made it so the pets are now no longer sleight of handing all the cool shit they're doing. They're in there, they're always beating on stuff all the time. And it does bring very fun. It brings everyone in line both with like the expectation from the original game, but also just with like the goal with it with the pet system was to make them more impactful, deep, or whatever else, not to like somehow hide the fact that they're cooler than they used to be, right? And so that's kind of, you're like, oh fuck, whoops.
Well, it was kind of a compensation thing because in the first game, pets had like this. Each pet had a very basic passive benefit. So I think it was like, for example, the Vama pet. It gave you something kind of like Thrift, actually, where you had like a 25% chance to recover a bomb if you threw a bomb. That was it. That was all that it did. And then otherwise, it just vomited tadpoles on things and did shit tons of damage. So all the passive effects for all the pets were these really low level, kind of not very impactful things. And so the pet really was just about whatever pet does a lot of damage, you just pick.
So the Vama was basically always the choice people made, right? If you're trying to like min-max anything in Crashlands 1. So we wanted to avoid that problem of like the pet being one
pointless. Yeah. Or like there's no reason to pick a different one, you know? Yeah. So we gave in Crashlands 2, we gave the pets all these extra passive benefits that boost you as the player, which just means that like once you have a pet, you can use that to synergize with your build and then you become a lot stronger. Yes. And your pet's there more as a support. And we're kind of worried like from a balance perspective, you know, like if the pet is buffing the player a bunch and making the player stronger, that if the pet is also doing shit tons of damage all the time, then we would have to kind of like give enemies lots of health to kind of compensate. Yep. But then we kind of get back into that gameplay style that some people did in the first game where they would just like attack once and then just run away. Just run away the whole time while their pet just solos everything because the pet's invulnerable, you know? And like some people liked that. Some people were like, I hate that this is the optimal quote way to play. Yeah. And so we had to do a lot of kind of balance tweaking and shenanigans of pet damage and all these different things to
but the short of it is
it all work.
Pets work exactly the same as they did. Plus, so they still have that like every 20 seconds, they got a cool ass ability they do that hits hard or does whatever. Plus, they have essentially a basic attack. So this also is a kind of a nice thing where the pets actually use more of their total abilities that are available, right? So previously, typically you'd unlock like maybe you could get an enhancement to one of the attacks that would add another ability into the mix. But now they basically each one of them almost does like their full kit. So it's either like during the basic attack chain or for their fancy ability. And so it's really cool.
Yeah, well, I think that was also part of it too. Is it kind of before the change of the pets have their basic attack, it kind of felt like the wild versions of your pet were more capable because they're doing more kinds of stuff, right? And then your pet is mostly hanging out and then doing like one mega thing, right? But it doesn't feel like a fully realized sentient being, you know, like it's just like it's missing something.
Yeah, like how come once this thing's domesticated, it just doesn't know how to do all this shit? The wild version.
Yeah. So now they're much more in line with the original game in terms of how they function, and they're just like it's just more fun. More fun.
It is very fun and it's a lot more chaotic now in combat to keep track of what's going on because your pet's just fucking in there. You know,
that took some time to get used to actually. But that's okay.
Well, so that was point number two. I think the third point, which I think you're going to skip, or I guess.
No, I was about to say it right now.
Well, I have a bonus though, because the third one was actually the early game combat problem, which was like we didn't open up all the weapons and stuff. Early didn't. So we added a bunch of gadgets and stuff like that in. Again, we've talked about that. It's just like it didn't slick into the early combat thing in such a way that now like the game is really like basically there's this point where you'd hit typically like midway through the husk before, where you'd have enough pet stuff going on where combat just started feeling kind of amazing. And there's this particular area that's like in like the woolly wastes is kind of toward the ends of the husk. And it's one of those areas like all the creatures are there. There's just, and you have all your kit and there's just like a lot going on. And
well, that's also where you first get access to two of the weapon types, right? You get access to the poison weapons and the fire weapons like midway through the husk.
Yeah.
So with all those changes though, suddenly actually early Mantle feels like that now, like early
the whole game feels
like that. And so I'm really excited to see what that does as far as that initial player perception of like, not having some additional combat choices and stuff like that, and it being a little slower because it's just not slow anymore. It's just like you really get a bunch of cool stuff to go. So that is the actual like third one, and then we had a bonus from this past week.
Bonus
one, a big one.
This wasn't planned.
It was planned for next patch actually.
It was planned for patch 1.2, and this is the idea of random stats on gear. So this is kind of like one of the hallmarks of the first game is you'd craft armor or you'd craft a weapon. Those are the only types of gear that got random stats. When you crafted it, then we would roll a random quality. So it'd be like, we would use kind of that typical quality color scale that's used in a lot of games nowadays of like white is basic and then green is good and then like blue is better and purple is epic and orange is legendary. So we would like pick a quality of the weapon or the armor, and then based on the quality, you would get a certain number of random stats on it. And so you just like whenever you crafted something, you never quite knew what you were going to get. In the original Crashlands, we didn't have the equipment sets or the more kind of comprehensive play styles and stuff. And so the random stats on gear was basically how you differentiated your play style.
Right.
Basically.
It's the only mechanism
you could use. But basically in only two ways, right? Because like normally you'd have stats that would say like, oh yeah, your weapon sometimes makes lightning hit a target, or your weapon sometimes makes things bleed or whatever. And those were stats. And the stats just increased the chance of that happening. And then the one other stat that actually like affected what you did was damage reflection, right? So if you got damage reflection, then you would stand there and just blow shit up by being hit. And if you didn't get damage reflection, then you would just walk up and melee swing with your weapon, right? What that kind of felt and looked like was a little bit different, like if lightning is coming out or something like that.
Emphasis on the little bit, So
yeah.
So when we're looking at all the feedback stuff, as we're planning 1.2 patch last Thursday and Friday, because we'd wrapped up all this other stuff. And Seth and I were looking through the feedback stuff, and like, okay, we're still in big potatoes mode, so it's like only focus on the things that are like some subset of the players are disappointed by or feel like is missing, right? Especially these like comparison things with the first game, because there's a large portion of players, again, like we mentioned, I think in the first week or so, largely the negative reviews we get are not from complete noobs to Crashlands. They are from people who played the original game and really were hardcore about it, really liked it. And because we made so many systemic changes to make it so that the overall, almost like basically the game just works better for most people, if that makes sense now. And this is true. Like we see it in the data, right? The game has more than double the median playtime of the original game. Like it is a runaway difference in effectiveness for most people. But
the people who have strong opinions about Crashlands 1 are the people who are on the other side of the median for Crashlands 1, right? Or like they're the people who loved everything
people
about
who
that
stuck
design
around despite the fact that they had these like design holes that kicked a lot of people out. And so one of the big things was this like this sense that there was a loss because there was no randomization at all, right? In any aspect of Crashlands 2, which of course is one of those funny things from a design standpoint, because as we discussed before, like that was also like a problem, right? It was part of the series of problems that were all related to this sense of grindiness in the first game.
Yeah, because that was the most common complaint about the first game, was that it's just it's like overwhelmingly grindy as you get further and further into it.
Yes.
And that's a result of randomness.
Yep. So then as we were discussing like all the stuff that would go in the system and what we could possibly do with it, Seth was like, well, we have like the armor, the weapons are complicated. They have so much stuff going on. They end up interacting with the sets. Like there's a lot of other stuff there that have really made them into their own whole new system, right? But the armor is kind of just a stat stick at this point. Like it's just, you just get more stats.
The armor was like you'd craft the armor.
And you move the fuck on.
And then you move on and you never think about it. And also when you craft it, it's not exciting because like you look different now because you've got this new helm or whatever. But it didn't meaningfully like change how the game felt. It gave you some more HP and like maybe like some resistances or whatever. But no surprises.
And you couldn't
just do it once and move on.
Yeah, you couldn't use it. It's just like a straight power upgrade. It's like getting an Infinisuit infusion, right? It's just a straight power upgrade. That's kind of what it was. And so Seth just kind of like poked. I guess we talked about it. And Seth's like, I'll go look at it. I'll go like, because we call it poking the fan, which is like if you got a problem, but you're not actually sure how big of a scope of a change it would be, you have to go poke it first to see, right? Before you decide what to do. So Seth poked it over the weekend, and it was just
I checked it over the weekend, and I was like, basically where we were at was because of the pet changes, we had to do an additional round of localization.
Yes.
And that was planned to start on Tuesday. Okay. Because of the new text and the changes of like what pets did and stuff. And so over the weekend, I was like, if I can figure out how this random stats thing will work in Crashlands 2 by Tuesday, and we know all the text that we're going to need, then we can submit to localization, and we'll still have a couple more days to sort of iterate and balance the thing while we're waiting for the translations.
Yeah, because it basically always takes 2 days of a turnaround to get. It's like we'll tell them when it's going to be ready. We get it ready on day 1. On day 2, they ingest it, distribute it to their people, all that kind of stuff. And then on day 3, we get it unless it's a really large batch, right? And so it's kind of like the sequence. And it's like no matter what happens, because on their side, they have to orchestrate, 2 or 3 people per language.
People, yeah.
And so, so they have to get like suddenly 20 people on board all at the same time to get it all to happen so that we get it back. Because any one language, if someone's like on vacation or whatever, right?
Yeah, you might need a sub.
Yeah, then they have to like figure that out. And so no matter what we do, there's always this lag. And so if we can try to like get the strings done ahead of time and then we've got like another couple days.
Well, that was the thing Seth, we were talking about. Seth was like, well, I mean, it is the case that technically if we figure out enough of it to get the words figured out, then we will not delay the patch, which is what I did. So we were like, wow, let's fucking go.
Just go. Yeah. So this week has been basically implementing that system and then playing around with it. So it only applies to armor. Like Sam was saying, we didn't touch weapons because weapons are much more specific and part of
that would be a whole, we thought about it. We couldn't figure out how to do it in a way that wouldn't produce
just be
more
dumb,
weird shit.
basically.
So the armor is the easy place to put it. Yeah.
But I do think this is a good example though of like if it's just kind of thinking about the design side of this, right? Crashlands 1, we were leveraging procedure generation and randomness to create new experiences and content and all this kind of stuff so that we could kind of leverage our limited resources, but also just create lots of surprises. And it was fundamentally based on randomness.
It was the only mechanism by which we could generate.
It's the only mechanism. Crashlands 2.
It's how you got recipes. It's how you got pets. Yep. It's like everything happened through just randomness.
Yeah, Crashlands 2, we swung the pendulum all the way the other way originally. And we were like, okay, so that's why that was so grindy. We've got the resources now to create bespoke surprises, create bespoke experiences all the way through the game. So now the initial player experience is essentially random because it's all new to you as you go, right? But those elements of surprise that come from just like random stuff out in the world were completely gone. Mm-hmm. And now what we're finding is basically if you want elements of both of those things, right? If you take elements of both of those things together, then you get the best possible outcome, which is you get the fundamentally designed experience where we know exactly what kind of surprises and experiences that we're delivering. But then we allow this degree of chaos on top, and which gives like, so Seth was finding that when he was playtesting it, he was just like, holy shit, I just lost hours going out to reroll my armor because it was fun to see if I could get this particular stat really boosted to a high level. And now all of a sudden, like, you're just having a lot more fun in the game. But in this, I think that's the beauty of Crashlands 2, by us not changing what we're doing with Crashlands 2 to be like Crashlands 1, but bringing in those elements into it. Then now that's an optional sort of way. So like in Crashlands 1, if you wanted to, it was a grind. That was how you got it, right?
But it was a grind, but it was a grind that I did by
you chose that because it wasn't the only
difference, right? That's what makes it not actually like a grind in the negative sense, but a grind in the positive sense.
Exactly.
Like, oh yeah, it's like finding a shiny Pokemon. Like you don't fucking need a shiny Pokemon, but it's fun to go get one. Does it make sense? Because you don't need one. If they were like, you got to go capture a shiny Pokemon, it's going to take you 17 hours.
Yeah. Well, if you think back to the original
questions, like,
if you think back to the original Crashlands also, like people would talk about how grindy the game was, but then the stuff that everybody was always doing and talking about and talking to each other about,
the gongs
were the mega like the grindiest elements of all. But it was because, again, those were the ones they didn't have to have.
Optional.
Those are optional ones.
Yep.
Yeah, because the difference in what makes something a grind is or not is just choice. If you if you're forced to do it to progress, and you just know it's going to take 3 hours or whatever of just nonstop something,
my favorite,
it's just a grind.
Actually, it's true because like the other part that we'd always hear from the end of Crashlands 1 was the finding of depressurized larvae, which you need a bunch of them for some of the final like armor weapons or something like that. And those things, they just randomly spawn on the ground. And again, it's procedural. So like we couldn't actually control anything about this. And we had this huge issue in the game with in the first zone with Walker Root and the third zone with these fucking larvae, where anything that was kind of rare.
That we wanted to be rare, so that was interesting, you know.
Yeah, it was almost impossible for players to find because there was no edges to the map, because you couldn't explore everything. You were just fucking wandering. Then like, even if we said it was rare, we put it down in like little pockets because you're a player and you're just walking around and there's just no way to know what you're missing, or like that you might be able to go uncover more, you know.
There's
like
nothing you can do on purpose to like.
Yes, exactly. Right, it's a wandering game. It's not an exploring game. It's all wandering. Then like literally we'd have stuff where players would play for, they'd walk around for like 4 hours. I remember this during the beta or something like that.
And just never find it.
And not be able to find a patch of this like Walker Root or some of these depressurized larvae. And it's like, that sucks. And that's the result of procedure generation stuff, because like in order to make something rare, truly rare, right, you have to reduce the frequency of it. But you can't make sure the player sees that if the world is essentially infinite for them to walk around it. Does that make sense? Right?
Well, I think it's a top-down view, so they can't look out in the distance. You can't see I see it over there. Like you don't see immediately around yourself.
But it's also the general caution of when you're doing procedure generation stuff from a design standpoint is when you want stuff to be rare, what you typically do is you'll say, okay, I'll just give it, there's some event that you do, whether it's walk out in the world to spawn new world tiles, or whether it's craft, or it's harvest something or craft something, whatever. There's something the player does, and in doing that, the dice gets rolled, right? And so if you want it to be rare, you'll typically just be like, okay, I want it to be rare, so I'll just make it so that 1% of the time that thing happens, right? Then that's the probability I give it. Then you like roll a random number, see if it's less than 0.01, whatever, and then throw it, right? The problem with that very simple approach is that when you then deliver the game at scale, you're going to see the whole probability distribution of player experiences, right?
Yeah, and that's going to include some players literally will not get it for 10
some
hours.
Players will not get it forever. We already saw this just with the Steam beta, where because we've added in some special drops. Yeah, we've got a random drop, which I think we actually list in the patch notes, so it's not like secret. But if you blow up Explungus, then there's just a random drop rate for this really cool gadget, and it's something like 1 in 100, whatever it is, right? And so I knew it was in there. And so when I started my new playthrough, I was like, fuck yeah. Every time I saw Explungus, blow it up, blow it up, blow it up. And it wasn't that long later where I got one. It didn't feel like a weirdly long time, but it felt like it felt random, you know? But
I was just talking with Sampy this morning because she started her new playthrough yesterday. And she was like, oh yeah, I started a new save, and then like I just walked up to an Explungus and just got this new gadget. Like literally the first one she hit, she's like, "Oh, it's so cool!" I was just like blasting Slugabuns with this thing like right away. Awesome,
because that's one side of the distribution, and then the other side we saw a player who like constructed a whole Explungus farm because they just like weren't getting it, but they knew it existed.
Like 8 hours,
and then like hours and hours later, they finally get it right, and so you have to be really careful
on that side of things for most of the content, right? Yeah. And it's true that like once you have like a bunch of those possible. So if you have like 100 things that all have rare drop chances,
and none of them are required like for anything in particular,
right? Yep. Then the chance of you getting something is actually good, right? Because there's just so many possible options. So basically what we've done then is with the armor, and we've already experienced this, then we've been playing in the combo of we had legendary mode, which is basically a even more hardcore difficulty, where everything's faster, everything hits harder, and it really requires that you know your shit, and basically requires that you like think about and reroll your armor, you know, to like, especially for boss fights.
Yeah, and enemies have a lot of health in legend mode. Yeah. So you actually have to figure out how to do big damage consistently and safely.
Well, I think this is kind of interesting too about how players sort of evaluate what it means by a difficulty mode, you know, where you'll see a player say something like, oh, all they did was increase the health. Like that's such a lazy way to do it. And you're like, well, no, what the health does when it's larger is it means you have to either spend a lot more time hitting it, putting yourself at much greater risk, right? And so that means you have to be far better at the game.
Dodging. Yeah.
Or it requires that you more deeply understand how the systems work so that you can deal a lot more damage, right? But either of those, there's a really good reason hitting it to increase the health as how that mechanism works, right? But I do think the most fun thing that Sam came up with for legendary mode is when you are going to recover your dead.
Oh, yeah.
Sam was like, what if we just make that timer longer? So like the time required when you like run up to it and you kind of like wave your hands on it and you can't do anything else. And the little bar is going up until you can recover all your items.
Because here's the thing. The enemies attack faster.
Yeah.
And they
quite a bit faster.
And hit a lot harder. Fuck you up. And so, and you drop all your shit into your dead, right? And we don't do the Dark Souls
thing. You're going to have to get it.
Yeah. We don't do the Dark Souls thing where like if you die again, it disappears, which could be fun. But you know, we don't do that. So you could still, like, if you have multiple deaths in an area, whatever. But like what I was finding was the time was just short enough where I could essentially just kind of run by enemies, and while they were trying to get me to attack me, manage to get my body. And so I was like, man, if you put like a little extra time on there, because the whole thing of getting your body back is a little adventure. It can be. Mm-hmm. And so, especially in legend mode, it feels like that's exactly where you should put that.
Yeah. Like extra you were finding that like it was the timer allowed it so that you didn't have to go in and fight your way back in. You could try to like,
I didn't have to figure out.
Get out.
I don't even fight. Like I didn't have to figure out anything about how to get my body.
It was short enough that you could. It was like 1.5 seconds, and your spacewalk stuns for 2. So like you could literally stun an enemy and then just recover your dummy within that time and peace out.
So if you make it just a little bit longer, then you have to you gotta figure out how to get your body back actually, right, from the creature that murdered you, that is now like standing around it, kind of. And it's just it adds like a little bit of extra terror and flavor.
Yeah, I think this is just one of these really interesting things about game design, right? Where somebody will see like a designer pull a lever of some sort and be like, that lever is so boring. It's just health. It's just speed. It's just whatever, right?
Duration. Yeah.
And not realize like how carefully thought through the original design was of like how all those levers are set, right? And what pulling them actually fundamentally changes about the gameplay experience, right? Because that's why the levers are there.
It's more like tugging on a piece of a web than it is like pulling a lever that doesn't.
Right. Because everything moves with it.
Everything moves with it. Like you kind of reshape the whole thing by like adding a little more tension here, right? And the whole shape changes. I'm really excited about that.
I mean, well, this is why, because I like when I was playing WoW, we talked about Mythic Plus, which is the idea of like you do these dungeons that just get harder and harder and harder. But what makes them get harder is just enemies deal more damage and have more health. That's what happens as you go up each level. And the interesting thing is like a lot of people make graphs and data and breakdowns of player participation at different levels of Mythic Plus. And they'll graph it out by which classes or which specializations are represented at these different levels. What you kind of see is like at the lower levels, it's pretty even. Like there's just as many rogues as there are
everybody can play
and whatever. Yeah. But as it goes up and up, suddenly there'll be a break point where like maybe from like between, level 13 and 14 of these dungeons, suddenly all the paladins disappear. Because that little extra 10% damage that enemies are doing at that point, it overcomes some tightly tuned thing about how paladins are able to deal damage or how they're able to survive or something, and they just can't hack it past that point, right? And so you think like all that they did was increase the enemy damage. So like that's
you gotta look at the knock-on effects, right?
Yeah. But there's so many things that go into like staying alive in this game that the damage is really, really important, and there's these breakpoints. So
so I will say
like legend mode is super fun.
Legend mode is super fun, and then playing with the armor ones that feels just like the original game now, like even more so, you know what I mean? Which I think is great. And I do think it's one of those things where we were talking about internally. When we launched Level Head in early access, we had a very particular way that we thought the delivery of all the tools that are in the editor should be rolled out to players, which was largely through like, I'm pretty sure it was like you beat campaign levels.
And you played the campaign to unlock. Because the idea was like you would play in the campaign and we would kind of show you a new mechanic because you beat a level that has that. And then once you beat that level, then you would now get that item that you could put into your own levels.
Right. And again, anything we do has a lot of thinking behind it, which I think is sort of first and foremost.
It's not necessarily correct.
It's not correct. It's not always correct, but we definitely think about it. So, and that was kind of what's funny was where it's like, it seemed very apparent that like, okay, it's a new platform where people don't know what these items are, even if they have like references to Mario items or whatever else.
It's not like Mario Maker where you can just give a person every Mario item because they've seen it. Anybody has seen every single kind of thing.
So we were like, okay, we need to show people stuff before we give it to them. And that was part of when we launched the Level Head into early access. That was like how the whole thing worked. And it's one of those funny ones where like we had a lot of what seemed like very good reasons for that, right? And then once it meets the actual like full player base,
players hated it.
Yeah, you're like, actually, never mind. Like it's not doing what we want it to do. And so I think what you see is when you see like a failing on the design side or even like a hole, I think it's easy, and we do see this, and this is part of the annoying thing with, I guess, like gamers, capital G gamers these days, is like the tone of reviews and shit that people leave is so angry, and
they're just so fucking mean.
Well, it's all bad faith stuff, right? Like everyone's used to like, you can only yell on the internet to get attention, and like the meaner you are, the more likely it is that like other people upvote your shit. And it's like all this kind of.
But it's also because people don't understand how games work and how they're made, right? Because the accusation that kind of like is either explicit or sort of implied all the time when something, and I think we see this with a sequel in particular with Crashlands 2, right? If there's something that we didn't do in Crashlands 2 that we did do in Crashlands 1. The immediate assumption is we didn't do it because we were cutting a corner of some sort, not because we had a design intent that may or may not have landed, because that's a an important piece as well, right? But so when it came to like the pet stuff, people were like, "Oh, the pets don't do anything." Like they rather than being like, "What about the design changed and that and then just didn't work?" Right? Their assumption was, "Oh, we were too lazy to have pets like attack because they don't understand that we actually had to not do something for that to happen, right? Rather than do something for that to happen, because there's no way for a player to understand how like a game actually gets constructed."
Yeah. We're just trying to make the best experience.
100%. And
but the game is for players, and we are not players because we can't experience our own game the way a player does. And so, like, once it's out there, and then we start getting the player feedback, then we can actually see how accurate we were.
Well, it's not only that either, right? It's players are not a monolith. Players are a whole bunch of subsets of players with overlapping opinions, right? And so, because like we said, like the vast majority of our players of Crashlands 2 really liked everything about how Crashlands 2 was designed, right? Mm-hmm. But a significant minority subset, in particular people who played Crashlands 1, really didn't like some of the changes that we made, right? Mm-hmm. And
I would say it wasn't so much some of the changes, so much as it was some of the things that we didn't bring forward.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of like what we're talking about.
Right.
Maybe apples and oranges, but like it's like the thing that's odd to me, I think, about how like this the player dev response these days, the initial one is always like so weirdly framed around this idea that like the devs are they're out to get you.
Pull a fast one.
I saw this one review on our Steam page, which just made me so mad, which was this guy being like, in big, people make their text really big now in the reviews. And it was like, it's just like they try to get you past the 2-hour mark so you can't refund it. And I'm like,
as if we like meticulously calculated,
Yeah.
All right, players are going to hit this point at 2 hours. All right, we're done working on the game after that. We're just not going to add anything.
Which is particularly funny though, because the game keeps opening up, and the main complaint about it, especially from like professional reviewers, was that the first 2
hours are the worst.
Are too slow, and there's not enough stuff going on.
Yeah, so it's like you see stuff like that, and it is disheartening on the dev side. I mean, to be honest, like it's very annoying because
it's pretty emotionally difficult to read through.
It is very challenging
to read through reviews in a way where you're like we're reading through them so that we can figure out what we should be working on and improving in the game.
Yes,
but people are so aggressively mean.
Yeah, and that bad faith, reviews. Like bad characterization aspect of it, of like saying that we're doing lots of like weirdly convoluted evil shit, and it's like we're not doing that. It's like we don't have time. We don't have time or motivation.
If
I wanted to grift you, I would drop a meme coin. I wouldn't be.
We'd be in free to play.
Why would we have spent 5 years making a game?
Exactly.
To try to trick you into only playing the first 2 hours. Exactly. If we were doing that, we could have done that in months, days even.
But I think the point is like there's a lot of really, really good feedback, right? In like just from players directly or in these reviews in the Discord or whatever else. And like a big part of the challenge post-launch for any dev, including us, is like somehow ingesting that without like wounding your soul, especially for the first one. Because usually what happens, and what I'm really excited to see and I'm curious about is like players tend to soften on a dev team once they see that the dev team is listening to the shit they're doing. It's just like real people, right? Just for some reason, hyperbole. And so
the problem is though, is that's true for the players who are already playing and already being mean, is they soften as they see stuff change. But the new players coming in, they're not going back and reading devlogs.
They'll see something new, and they'll be.
There's just always. I mean,
it's true,
but the community does do a good job of sort of becoming sort of like the community largely, becomes like more in the dev's corner over time, so that when the treadmill of new people come in, being the way that they are, they tend to get managed by the community. And we even saw this in the beginning of the launch, like in our Discord community, which is our most active community. Mm-hmm. Is the community instantly would like you said, kind of act as an immune response to somebody coming in.
Yeah, to be like,
and acting in bad faith. But in context like the Steam forums, which isn't like where our active existing community is.
Well, no one wants to hang out in the Steam forums.
Yeah, well, and it's also like notoriously a toxic environment, right?
Exactly. So you don't want to hang out there.
Yeah, you don't see that as much, but you still do see it. It was, and even early on, there were a few very weirdly framed complaints in the Steam forums, and I was trying to stay on top of that in the first week. But most of them just had somebody replying. But the problem is that the replies are also bad, right? Even though they're in our defense.
Because somebody comes in with angry energy, and then somebody replies with that same energy, and then the whole thing just kind of explodes.
Yeah, it's just this.
So it's a very difficult line to walk. But I'm really excited to get the patch out, because it's kind of like it should be out by the time this podcast comes out. Because I'm really excited to kind of get the ship of broad player sentiment, like fully oriented in our direction, so that as we deliver on in the next patch and 1.2 and 1.3 after this, that it just gets better and better. You know what I mean? Because I think a big part of it is like as soon as players feel like they are being listened to, like the player community knows it's being listened to by the devs, I think they tend to chill out a little bit. And we are listening, you know? That's the thing. Like we're listening a lot because the whole goal is just to deliver an excellent Crashlands experience. And so we've already, like with 1.1, I mean, that's a shitload of fundamental changes. Changes.
But yeah, right? Well, here's the thing. And this is something we're kind of laughing about this week where it's like, admittedly, some of these reviews are people kind of being assholes, right?
Oh, 100%.
But they're right.
Yeah, that's the thing.
You know, like if they come in and they're like, I wanted this game to be better in these ways and I feel let down because it didn't deliver in these dimensions.
Totally.
Right?
I can validate that emotional response. You know what I mean? You're not right to be a dick about it.
Yeah. But you're right about the fact that like that there's probably a design hole there, you know? And we're fixing it and it's going to get better and better. And we do want this feedback to keep coming, ideally at a
with less
different tone.
Yeah.
But I have to say though, I feel so much worse reading a review from somebody who's disappointed. It's the like, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed kind of a problem.
There's no way you can be like, yeah, just fuck that guy. You know what I mean? If someone's just like,
if somebody comes in hot and they're like,
just didn't do it for me.
It just, yeah.
Well, I think it's also because when somebody comes in hot like that, they're almost always super wrong about something, right? Either it's because they're accusing us of something that we know we didn't do, right? Or it's because they're so mad they lose all sense of like curiosity. And so they don't actually dig into the thing they're mad about. They just express the madness, right? And I mean that in both senses of the word. So they just express that. And then they leave, and that makes it really easy for us. So this is also why it's counterproductive. It's counterproductive for a million reasons, but it's counterproductive on the one hand because it prevents us from wanting to go read feedback because we have to steel ourselves, right? But then when we see feedback like that, we basically discount it every time because we're like, this person is mad and mean, and there's going to be no actual content to their complaint because even if there's...
Can we help this person or are they just mad?
Yeah. And we also know we can't reply to somebody like that most of the time because they're going to want to fight. Right. And so, so you never want to argue anyway. If you're a dev and you're like waiting through your reviews or comments and stuff, you never want to say, well, actually, this is good because X. Like you absolutely don't want to do that. What you do want to be able to do is like, say you deliver a patch like we are right now, and you see a really angry review about a thing that's addressed in the patch, you want to be able to pop in and just say, hey, thanks for this feedback. You basically ignore the sentiment, right? You say, hey, thanks for this 100%. Feedback. We have, we think we've resolved this in the latest patch. So we hope you go try it out and let us know if it works, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Some of those people are so hostile that even that makes them even more mad, right? And but we still have to do it because we have to make every effort to try to like turn review scores around and all that kind of stuff.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, we're gonna flip those reviews. Yeah, once the patch comes out, then we got to do like a little bit of a review flipping campaign. I think we're still chilling like around 85 or something like that. Yeah. So it's like, all right, go back through, and all the people who gave us a thumbs down, but now their grievances are now resolved. Just let them know, reply to it, and then. Maybe they'll come back and check it out.
That means that people have to go read through only negative reviews to do that, right? Which is, oh boy,
which is a journey.
And it's a lot of them because
nobody wants to go on.
Even though like our overall rate is good, over 80%, which sounds like a lot. If you've got 1,300 reviews or whatever, right? That's 200 fucking. That's 200.
You got a couple hundred angry negatives.
We were cracking up because I was like, I want to see if you go look at Baldur's Gate 3, which is like just beloved, right?
Won every award ever.
Whatever award, like what. How do the negative reviews feel there, right? And so we looked at them, and there's because the game has so many positive, just so many reviews. It has 3,000 negative reviews.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's still like 97% positive.
Exactly.
Or something like that. Yep.
But still 23,000 negative, and like the content's the same. It's just the same vibe where it's like people are just angry about stuff, and the expression is very
just mean,
typically kind of mean, right? And so it's like, okay, it isn't in no way an us thing. It's very much a like. People on the internet are weirdly mean about shit. So that at least kind of gives you some grounding in it when it's like, okay, yeah. Even the greatest games of all time have literally 20,000 people who
have armies of people
just very mad
who are just enraged about this.
Like it's okay. But yeah, you do. It is. I
wonder if I didn't actually look, but I wonder if you take a game like A Short Hike. Like which is just like this adorable, friendliest vibe game in the universe. Like, what do the idea of like somebody, it feels like somebody kicking a puppy. If like somebody came in and was like me in those reviews,
weird,
but I
right?
bet anything.
People will do it.
Anything. They're fucking in there, just being absolute shits.
Any negative review is going to have, there's a good chance it's weird, overly negative. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there are a significant number of negative reviews that are just reasonable. They're like, they express
It's well thought out.
They express a frustration of some sort, something they didn't like, whatever, something that flipped it from being an overall positive to an overall negative experience.
Yeah, I think the problem is that it's not it's a minority, certainly, that are like more, I don't know, like evil characterizations of the devs or just like way more intense. But it's not as small as it fucking should be. It's not like
it's a large fraction of negative reviews.
Yeah, exactly. It's still like a quarter or like a third or something like that, or just like full on. And so,
well, even the ones that aren't like that are
we'll win them over.
Yeah, even the ones that aren't like that are the hostage style ones where somebody didn't like one thing, like they loved the game, but there's like one thing they didn't like, and they leave a review and they say something like, I'm not going to play anymore until this is fixed, or when this is fixed, I'll flip my review or whatever. They basically use it as a mechanism to not rant about stuff, not be mean specifically.
They're yelping.
They're basically just like, there's this thing I don't like, and if I leave a negative review, then there's a chance that you now feel like you have to fix it, right? And so there's this like hostage taking kind of thing that happens, and those ones also make me angry for a different reason, because I'm like, you like this game, like overall, you really like this game, and it's kind of like when you read like some of our reviewers of the game, like the professional reviewers, where it's like, oh, loved everything basically. Beginning was a little slow, only complaint. And then 80 out of 90. It's like your only complaint is that, and that is docked 20%.
That removes a full fifth of the score of the game.
Yeah,
everybody's got a nitpick.
Yeah, I think it's even beyond nitpicks, where it's like, I guess all I'm trying to get at is that the reality these days is that if the dev team behind a game is dialed in, which we are, then every single game launches actually into early access, whether or not it says it is in early access or not, because, of course, the devs want to fix shit that people don't like. So this is why you see typically post-launch, everyone calls it post-launch content. You could say that every game is in early access, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But, like, the fact of the matter is, like, games don't just launch and then you're done.
Yeah, otherwise people will give a thumbs down and they go, dead game.
Even for single player shit. But even beyond that, it's like the reality is that if the dev team's good, they're good because they listen to players and they want to make something good for players. And so once you have a bunch of those players, then you just got some more stuff to listen to. And then it's hard to not, you know what I mean? Like it'd be much harder for us to like hear the feedback about stuff and then like stop working on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Cause it's like,
I'm determined. Like, we were chatting this earlier in the week and I was like, I'm determined to get above 95.
Yeah.
Like we will keep making this game better until it's overwhelmingly positive. And
you're going to like it.
Player feedback. And we're going to keep adding cool shit. Like I'm not going to say what is coming in patch 1.2, but we've talked about it this week and oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh,
some fun, weird stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, we'll just keep chipping away at it. There's one thing though that we're not doing in patch 1.2 that we definitely know we're not doing. And there's a reason for that, which is we're not adding more bosses yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That is something that players want, and we know they want it, and we want it. But bosses have a problem, which is they're fucking expensive to make, and they only last 3 minutes.
Yep.
So until we can, it's okay for them to be expensive to make. When expensive, I mean like they take a couple of weeks. Yep.
A long time.
And then it's just over, right? So we need to basically solve the problem of the second part of that. We're like, all right, how do we make it so that each boss we make isn't just a 3-minute experience that is done forever? How do we make some kind of replay value in bosses, whether it's like some kind of a boss rush thing or some way to like re-summon the boss and do something, it's deeper than just adding more bosses.
Yeah, you have to nestle it inside of a better system for managing long-term replayability that doesn't exist, right? Yeah, and then you have to make the bosses too. And so
this is the interesting.
The reason there's only 4 bosses is because like if each one takes a couple of weeks and it lasts like 3 minutes, it's like, well, we could have added 10 more bosses, but the game wouldn't have come out until fucking November.
Yep. But it was so we need to. It was that, but it was also because like this going back to like the idea of player feedback and comparing one game to another, right? But the other thing about the bosses is we strongly considered over and over delaying the game until we added in more boss fights, right? The only reason we were thinking about doing that was for parity with the original, because the original has a bunch of boss fights. Experientially, for all of our playtests, none of us missed boss fights in Crashlands 2. Because again, like Crashlands 1 needed boss fights to overcome how basically everything was random. So we needed boss fights to add some interesting elements, right? And also notably, looking at the player feedback, a significant minority of players are very angry about the smaller number of bosses, right? And treating it as like an us being lazy thing, right? But again, the only people who have said anything about bosses at all, positive or negative, are people who are comparing the number of bosses to the original.
Yes. We're doing a paint by number problem.
Which basically means we were correct that experientially, Crashlands 2 does not need those bosses. It
doesn't need them to survive because it has a lot of other cool stuff going on.
Yeah, the game is just so interesting all the way through. It doesn't actually need them.
Would it be nice to have a dozen more? Yes.
Yeah, bosses are cool. Nobody's arguing.
I want more bosses. Yeah. Everybody, if we said, hey, would you rather have more bosses or less or fewer bosses?
Yeah, exactly.
People would be like, more, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. But again, the only people who felt like it was missing were the people who counted up the bosses in Crashlands 1 and counted up the bosses in Crashlands 2 and were like, where'd all the bosses go? But that wasn't even expressed as a thing that they wanted to do. It wasn't even that they were like, I want to fight more bosses. It was just, why are there so few bosses this time around? Yes.
Right? Why are there fewer bosses? Yeah. Which again, fair.
Yeah, it's fair. Right? It's a fair question.
It's definitely a fair question, and it's something that we're gonna work on, not in patch 1.2, but we'll probably be taking a look at that in either the following patch or the one after. But it's because we need to figure out a way to make it so that there's more. We don't want bosses to be like armor was, right? We're like armor,
frankly, like they are in the first game, which is that once you defeat like the Bacon Weed Fairy, it's done. Once you defeat Jessica, it's done. Like there's no broader system that they're paired with, that they sink into, that lets you like, again, use that expensive content. And I mean, I'm not talking about money in particular, that's like related, but I'm mainly talking about time. Like the integration challenge of bosses is tremendous. It requires like everybody on the team who does content to be working together to build
on that boss.
It's not like because also quest to make it interesting.
Exactly, it's drops that make it worthwhile, or whatever.
Because even like the Bacon Weed Fairy in the first game, the reason that the Bacon Weed Fairy is so fun is that boss fight is absurd and like hilarious in its own right?
But the quest
to get there is so compelling and surprising and fucking weird that like. Honestly, every time I think of the Bacon Weed Fairy, I think of the journey to get there, right? And then and there's like a snapshot of a billion teeth flying at me, right?
Yep.
But I don't really think about the boss fight. Even like with the Jessica stuff, like that was like a fine boss fight, but the framing around
exactly
it being named Jessica and like how we get there, that kind of stuff.
But also the bosses in the original game were way, way simpler, where they basically worked the same as creatures, where they had like a couple of moves. They just picked the moves at random, and then they would just like chase after you and use them. Or in the case of Tuma, they would just sit there and do the moves. But in Crashlands 2, bosses are more they're more tied to the world. So
you have to make an arena for them to live in.
There's a specific place, and there's we have these kind of like invisible markers around that dictate kind of like how the boss is going to move around the space and where the boss will go at these different points in time and stuff like that. And every boss is like a very involved thing. So so where we're at is we definitely hear that players want that. We want that, but we don't want to just add more bosses under the system that bosses currently exist in, because it's not actually going to add much content. Yeah. Like if we added 10 bosses, then that would like add 30 minutes to your playthrough. And then you wouldn't have anything else to do with that, right? You can't fight them again or whatever. So we want to solve that problem, and so
it's a bigger design thing to chew on.
We got to let that marinate for a while.
Let us cook. Okay.
We will cook. The more bosses will be coming somehow or another. We just got to figure out what that's going to look like. There's one last thing I wanted to talk about before we wrap, which doesn't have anything to do with Crashlands 2 necessarily, but this is about Copilot. All right, GitHub Copilot specifically.
Your AI coding buddy who has been wonderfully filling in occasional things for us, on VS Code when we're programming GameMaker.
Yeah. And so a big reason why we are using VS Code and Adam's wonderful Stitch extension, which allows us to make GameMaker projects and stuff in VS Code, is because VS Code has GitHub Copilot. If we were programming within the GameMaker IDE, we wouldn't have access to Copilot. And as Copilot was first started appearing, Adam was using it for his web stuff. And he was like, man, this thing is like fucking sick. It does a really good job of
stupid time. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It helps you with lots of boilerplate crap.
And I think you guessed at that point, I was like, probably it was saving like 30% of your time or something from just like typing out.
Yeah.
It's
It
like
basically, it wasn't saving my thinking time because it's not, it wasn't good enough and it still isn't good enough. And never, in my opinion, will be good enough to dramatically save your thinking time. Because still, you got to know what you're doing and make decisions and stuff.
Right.
But once I knew what I was doing, as long as what I was doing wasn't absurd in some way, right? As in like the current line that I'm actively typing, it could guess the rest of that line correctly, fucking like 80% of the time. And that means that 80% of the time, I don't have to type a whole bunch of stuff. And I could just hit tab. Yeah. It's there.
Or make typos, which require backing up. Like there's a lot of layers in there of like incredible kind of silly small savings that stack up to a tremendously better.
Yeah. So when it was behaving as an autocomplete, then like a fancy ass autocomplete that would help me complete the current line, it was good enough that it was just saving me an enormous amount of typing time. And for smaller things like a particular function shape that's you commonly need that like happens all the time, but is a pain in the ass to like think through carefully to make sure you do it right. But that has been done boilerplate shit. It could just spit out the whole thing. And that is where it also removed the thinking part of like, not the process of being like, what am I going to do and how would I do it? But like, oh yeah, I have to think through all these pieces of this again for the thousandth time, right? To make sure I do it all right. Yeah, exactly. And to make sure I've covered all my cases or whatever and that kind of stuff where you're not really doing anything of value because again, you've already done it a million times, right? Yep. It can save me like in one tab. It can save me 15 minutes, right?
Yep. Yeah. And so you can think about like it kind of elevates you above the lower level programming problems and lets you focus more on the like architectural and structural and like higher level problems because it's doing the basic stuff.
Yeah, because it's doing what you were about to do. Like that's when Copilot is at its best, is when it does what you are about. You already know you're going to do. You just have to do it still, right? Mm-hmm. When it does that, the way that you would do it. Right.
So what happens? Yeah. So until recently, the way the Copilot would work in this context is there was something that people started referring to as the Copilot pause, where you would start typing stuff, and then like once you kind of hit a point where you were like, I've laid out enough framework here that I think Copilot will be able to figure this out and just go.
Yeah, and you get the hang of when that is, right? As you've been working with Copilot.
Yeah, because it had like some thinking time, Copilot did. And so you'd type, and then you'd be like, okay, let me just stop here and see if Copilot can just take the wheel. So you wait, and then maybe like 1 to 2 seconds later, bam.
I think faster than that, even what it feels like. It's probably like half a second or something.
So some code would appear, and then you'd look at it and then decide whether it was good, and then you'd, either keep it or toss it and, work a little bit more, and then pause again, and then you'd be like, okay, maybe now it knows, right? So for whatever reason, Copilot has been getting faster and faster and faster.
Because of course, it's one of the challenges of all the LLM stuff is people want it to be super
people want it to be fast. But that speed isn't just in like how fast it thinks of the answers. It's also just how fast it barfs out the answer after you pause.
As in how long it takes before your hands stop typing before Copilot's like, did you mean this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And the problem is if it gets really short, then it's sort of like if you're having a conversation with someone and they're like, did you mean to say this though? Or you want to take that this way? I'm going to go with the sentence now. I understand. And you're like, fucking, hold on a second.
It's someone who always finishes your sentences after you said 2 words and they're wrong every fucking time because you've only said 2 words. So how could they possibly know what you're going to say?
Well, even when it's right, because I've also run into this too, is that it doesn't feel like it's right less often, right? Or like getting me what I want less often. But because it happens like as I'm typing before I have taken the beat to be like, all right, I'm ready to, I know what I've thought and I'm ready to now hand off the rest, right? It happens while I'm still thinking. And so now all of a sudden I'm being like thought jammed by now now I'm evaluating what it did instead of finishing my own thought to plan what is supposed to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And oh boy, that is a different and bad experience.
It is. Yeah, so I literally this over the weekend when I was working on the new randomized armor stuff, I realized that like Copilot was making it fucking impossible for me to program. Like I could not think.
This is jumping in at the wrong fucking time.
And I find this to always be true for Copilot in contexts where where I'm like thinking context, right? So I've always had it disabled for markdown files because markdown files are where I'm thinking and planning and stuff. And I would find that it would try to like autocomplete the sentence. And I'd be like, fuck you, quit it. I'm trying to think, And that's been true the whole time. And it's also been true within comments in code. Because like the reason you write a comment in code is because you're trying to articulate what you're about to do.
Yeah. I hate this so much.
Right. You start writing a comment and it's like, I think I know what you mean. I think I know.
And I'm like, quit it. Let me finish thinking.
It's not for you, Copilot. It's for me.
It's so
for me.
Yeah.
So it's so aggressive now that it feels like it thinks it's the captain now, and it thinks that you are the co-pilot.
Well, I think this whole fucking vibes coding thing that's been taking off. It's like it feels like this is like married together, where people are literally turning over responsibility for the whole thing to these tools, and the tools are trying to accommodate that, where there's like, because they have like agent mode where it can like, you just tell it, I want a website that does blah. And it's like, here, let me go make a bunch of shitty files that approximately do that. Right. And like it's like everything is shifting over to the co-pilot taking the wheel, like you're saying. Right. And I think we're absolutely seeing that in just how it works now.
Well, look, if anybody from Microsoft is listening, it's fucking called Copilot. It's not called Pilot. All right. If you want a product that does literally everything and won't even let me think, then release that as a separate product and call that Pilot. Yeah. Let me use Copilot. Let me be in charge. Let me do the thinking. Because I've literally now this week, I fully turned it off. I'm not using Copilot anymore because I can't.
Because it won't shut the fuck up.
It won't shut the fuck up.
Just to continue that rant, something I used to love was Visual Studio Code. I mean, I still love it as a code editor, right? Love it. In the earlier days, I've been using it for years and years now, right? So basically, almost since it came out, since like 2018 at least. I was always so excited every month they release their monthly patch notes. Here's all the cool shit we improved and added and like made your editor experience so much better. For the past, 6 months, every update is about fucking Copilot integration and like LLM stuff, right? And I'm just like, I don't care. I don't want any of this. None of this is good. None of this is helpful for my experience. Mm-hmm. And all the stuff that used to be so fun and compelling about like cool, actual, useful experiences, right? There's just none of it anymore. And when I say none, I don't literally mean none because there's some, but it's always like the top 3/4 of the post are here's all the LLM shit we're doing. And the bottom bit is like, by the way, some accessibility features, some whatever, right? Just like a side note. And I think the one nice thing is that before the LLM bullshit revolution started, VS Code had gotten to the point where every single one of the things that I wanted it to be able to do, it was doing.
Already there.
Like a few months before the chaos started. They like finally hit my bucket list of like, yes, I want all these things to go. So now it's like, as a code editor, does everything I want. I am happy with it. But I'm bummed that I don't get to be excited at all anymore about like new releases of my favorite piece of software, Like patch notes for your favorite software or game or whatever are supposed to be so fucking delightful and fun because you're like, yes, here's cool shit I didn't even imagine would be useful, right? And now here it is, right? So, but I will make.
Well, if they keep an eye on the patch notes, because if they have a patch note that finally says you can decide how long it takes before Copilot gives you suggestions,
I still
turn that shit back on again.
I still read all the patch notes, but I was the final note about that is. There are a lot of things now because it used to be with Copilot, there was nothing like a setting. It was just either it was on or it wasn't. You could control which languages it was on for, right? They now have a fuckload of like things you can do to like tweak the behavior and stuff. And I haven't been nothing that I've seen that's like about how and when it does stuff, but about like. It's like tweaking the prompt in like language specific ways and that kind of stuff. And so when they first started finally adding some features like this was when I tried to do a custom thing where I was like, do not do anything in comments, which that didn't work. It just still kept spinning. And I think it's because like the way that it works too, right? Is if you provide instructions to an LLM, you're like, don't do anything under this scenario. You still have to send it to the LLM and have it give you nothing back, right? And the way that Copilot works,
it can't generate nothing though.
It can't generate nothing.
Right? I just got to do my job back. Okay, you send me something. Well,
my bet is it might actually send a response back that's got nothing in it, right? Except then Copilot itself doesn't understand what you're trying to do, right? Its job is just to pass stuff to the LLM and get things back, right? And so what it normally does is it gets like 10 very varied responses back, right? and shows you the one that, like, it shows you the top one, and then you can open up a panel that's like, here's the rest, right? So my bet is that even if you tell it not to do anything, some of the variants still have something in them, and then like the Copilot thing itself is like, oh, this is empty, this is empty, this is empty. Let me show you, and now it's the worst possible one because it definitely isn't what you're asking for. That's funny. So yeah, there's some vibe coding shit, man. I'm just getting so mad about it.
Yeah, but it's been a good week because I can feel my brain coming back. Like I didn't realize like just how much I had been depending on Copilot to just kind of just do shit for me,
It was really good at it. It was really good at being like,
it was good at it. Yeah,
I see where you're going with this.
But that kind of by extension means like I was getting a bit worse at it, because I'm offloading my thinking. It's like GPS, right? Like you use GPS to drive everywhere. You kind of stop paying attention to street names and landmarks and whatever, and you just kind of get in your own head and drive. And then someday the GPS is down for some reason, and you're like,
how do I get
where am I? Well, you're like, I've lived in this city for 20 years, but I don't know where the fuck I am.
It's true, because I've had a few occasions where just like Copilot was out temporarily or whatever, where I felt myself having to like overcome the pause and like
the Copilot pause,
and then as I was working on stuff, there's things that, because they're also like, I'm doing web dev stuff most of the time, and I don't touch most of like what the web can do. Because like if you're in JavaScript and a web browser and you like there's a thing called a window that's like the global thing that all the shit's attached to, right? If you're like window dot and then see what are all the things in there, there's like 1,000 things in there, like 1,000. I've never even heard of 900 of them.
Those options exist.
Anyway, those are there. And so this is one of the things I've noticed about Copilot that has been very helpful over time is when I'm like dipping into those things to like try to go do something that I'd never have needed to do before. I can tell exactly how I would do it, but I don't know what the thing is called that gets me on that path. I was able to rely on that so aggressively to just be like, it knows what I'm trying to do. It's seen a million examples of code doing that kind of thing. And so it gives me like the right thing that I didn't even know. Yeah. I knew something like it must exist, but wasn't sure what it was. And now all of a sudden I'm saved a trip from like doing a bunch of Googling or something, right?
Or even you're saved in a whole different way, which is like, if you knew that there was something to go look for, you can go look for it. If you don't know that there's something you can go look for, you're not going to go look for it. And that's
if you have a guess there's something there, but don't have a guess about what it could look like,
right? You can't even find it.
Then it's really hard to find. And so there's that piece that I noticed, like,
it's super useful.
It's extremely useful. And my historical mechanisms for dealing with that stuff was like, I guess I'm spending, 10 minutes,
4 hours,
half an hour, whatever, hours, Googling stuff and try to like fine tune and try to find some answer there that is gone. But there's this interesting thing where when I don't have access to Copilot, when those things come up, I feel like there's a skill I used to have that's gone, which was like knowing what that was, like knowing what the thing is that I'm no longer getting a completion for, right? When the reality actually is that I also didn't know that before Copilot. It just, I never had to, like I didn't have to know what the thing was. And it's like these things get conflated together in my brain when I'm trying to like live a non-Copilot life of, was that a thing I was good at? Did I used to know these and now I don't because I've forgotten it? Or did I never actually learn it? Or like,
but one thing you definitely get worse at is just typing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Like you type a lot less with Copilot. You spend a lot more time reading code. And yes, I noticed it this week. Like my hands are just a little bit more tired.
Yeah.
By the end of the day, because I'm just typing literally everything.
Yeah, I find that because I used to type like a lot of prose and a lot of code, right? And it's just like typing all the time. Now, when I'm typing prose, which I'm doing a lot more than usual because of all the biz dev stuff and all that, right? When I'm typing prose, I don't let LLMs do anything because prose is for thinking, so they're all off. Yeah. So when I'm typing prose, it's with the same deal. Like I feel myself typing more slowly than I used to. And absolutely, my hands are getting tired all the time, which just didn't used to be a thing.
So we are becoming weak.
Yep. I can feel it happening.
In mind and body.
Can you imagine if
machines are just siphoning our power?
Can you imagine being
strength?
like a freshman in high school today, right? And like
and never even having the chance to learn how to think or type,
because everything is trying to think for you all the time and trying to
critical thinking cliff coming up here pretty quick. But
and like the ability to type and like all this, because the ability to type was already going away because everyone just uses mobile, right?
That was already gone, I think.
Or gone even, yeah. And like all this
look at file explorers also gone. Yep. I don't know.
Yeah, it's gonna
much tech stuff.
I just feel so bad for the kids. They're gonna have a rough go of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's fair to say if you're like, kids should not use this thing because it'll make it harder for them to learn how to think. It's like, well, then maybe I shouldn't be using it either because I'm also a human being and my critical thinking and typing skills will deteriorate if I use
it was actually my plan. I was actually thinking about this today when I saw that because I just was reading the VS Code patch this morning, and also been mad about just recent how it has been behaving. But it has so many like tweaks now that one of the things I was going to do today or this weekend was just sit down and be like, can I make it?
Yeah, just make it a little better for you.
Just fucking chill out a bit. And like, can I do that yet? Or is it still insurmountable? Because if it is, I am probably also turning it off. Or at least having a toggle set up so I can quickly turn it on and off when I actually want it.
Yeah. Yeah. If we get a solution, maybe we'll mention it next episode. But yeah. So anyways, that's all the time we have for this week. Copilot rant over. We'd like to thank our producers, Fat Bard and Sampa Acosta, for putting the podcast together. And thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate to support the podcast, and links to the archives. And if you haven't yet, head on over to Steam, the App Store, or Google Play, and pick up a copy of Crashlands 2. Patch 1.1 is out and it's a fucking banger. And really the game is just getting better and better.
Recommend starting a new save so you can experience the whole thing from the beginning.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.